Hey guys, Ali, welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you can tell by the title of today's video, me and Brie are going to be talking about our experience getting into med school as well as a bit about the application process, because I remember back in like the summer when I was applying, it seemed really daunting and I felt overwhelmed by everything that was out there. So we just wanted to like summarize everything, I guess, in a quick video, as well as provide some resources that we found helpful during our application process. If you're new here, I just finished my undergrad at Mcat University and I'm heading to UBC in the fall, and
I just graduated from McGill University and I'm heading to U of T in the fall.
What's your name?
You already said I'm Brie. I'm Brianna. And another reason that we wanted to make this video is, I don't know about you, but I feel like whenever I was scrolling on the internet for resources for applying to med school, there's a lot of stuff for American med school, but there's not a lot of videos. Well, there are some good ones, but not as many videos about the Canadian med school application process, so hopefully this can shine some light on that. Disclaimer time! I kind of hate it when like incoming med students or current med students are like, pay me to review your essays or like review your application, or like I know what or like to practice interviews, because I'm like, I feel like none of us really know what got us in and like what we got in spite of, you know, like we could be like, oh, you should write your ABS this way, you should write your essays this way, but maybe we got in not because of how we wrote them, but like in spite of our essays. Like maybe our essays suck, but we just barely got in, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I kind of hate it when people have no basis that they're giving like tips and stuff on, but whatever, this is just like our opinions and our experience.
Yeah, my part of the disclaimer that I was gonna say is that we really want to like touch on a bit about like our experience and like what like our journey to med, but definitely don't take this as like a guide or like a be all end all, because we don't want you to be like curating your experiences to sort of fit what we did, because at the end of the day I think every applicant is like really unique and people come from like a diversity of backgrounds and experiences, so there's no like one right like cookie cutter way to go into med. And I also want to quickly say that we are both like more traditional applicants, I guess, because we just like entered med school right out of undergrad, but there's definitely,
and we were lucky enough to get an honor first.
Yeah.
Basically just wanted to say that this video is only really from one perspective and to give you a heads up that there are many more out there.
Yeah. It's a really long disclaimer. You can edit it. Do some cropping.
So jumping into the first section, we're going to talk a little bit about like our degrees and prerequisites that you need for med school.
Okay, so in case you didn't know, in Canada we have to do an undergraduate degree before you apply to medical school, but there's a lot of schools in Canada where you don't need the whole bachelor's degree. So if you wanted to enter medical school after only completing 3 years of a 4-year degree, you would apply and submit your application in the October of your 3rd year. So then you wouldn't graduate with a bachelor's degree. But if you wanted to complete the whole bachelor's degree, you would then apply in October of your 4th year. And of course people take gap years and do things after.
So each medical school has their unique requirements. There's certain schools like Western where you need to have 4 years done before you can apply. So definitely search up like the admissions like website for the schools that you're interested in applying to, and you can find all the detailed information on there. You can comment or like DM us questions, but most of the times you can find this information online already and it'll like save you the trouble.
Another reason why you should search it up and not just ask us is because these requirements and things definitely will change from year to year, so don't just rely on what we comment because or whatever.
Yeah.
So in general, for most schools, including Ontario schools, UBC, and I think Alberta schools, the application opens during the summer around July, and then your application is due in September or October, and then most interviews happen, I guess, from January to March-ish, and then you find out in May.
Yeah.
And then you would start the following summer.
It's a long waiting process, I gotta say. Yeah.
So long. But I know it's different for every school. I think Dalhousie and some of the schools, the application process happens a lot earlier and it's due earlier in the summer, so make sure you read those websites and keep up to date with those.
Yeah, definitely don't wait until like the very last day to submit your application. I say this because I know one person who couldn't apply to UBC because there wasn't enough time for their transcript to get delivered. Because it takes a couple of days for like certain documents to be sent over, and they need to receive all the documents by the deadline, not like you sending in all the documents before the deadline. So
True.
we mentioned earlier how you need to have like started your undergrad before you can apply, and you can do your undergrad in whatever like subject or like major you want, but most of the time schools will require certain prerequisites or like courses that you need to have taken before you can apply to the program. So this include like biology, like chemistry, just like
organic chemistry, biochemistry,
those are the
sometimes
classes.
English.
Oh yeah.
So I think one thing when I was trying to decide on my major that I heard a lot was people were like, oh, don't just do the typical pre-med majors because you think you have to take those to get into med school. And I also heard people talk about how oftentimes if you do a more interesting undergrad major, like if you major in music or something, it can actually be beneficial because it'll help you
like
kind of stand out with the crowd. So I was kind of like taking these thoughts into consideration, but in the end, I thought about like the topics that I enjoy are generally related to biology and biomedical sciences, so I didn't want to take a more quirky major just for the sake of like being unique. So I think that's good advice, as in like you don't have to do a biology or biomed or health sci major to get into med school in Canada. Like, you know, I know lots of people who did different degrees to get in. But definitely just, I think do what you enjoy and don't let all of these other voices sway you that much. So for my undergrad degree, I did an awesome program at McGill called Interdepartmental Honors Immunology. And it basically combined immunology, physiology, and biochemistry. And I really enjoyed it. Entering McGill, I had done the IB diploma program. Yep. So at McGill, that means I was able to complete my entire degree in 3 years, and I was essentially forced to skip a lot of the first year courses, like first year Gen Chem, biology, what else even, like that's it. So yeah, I graduated in 3 years.
So I just finished my 3rd year studying health sciences at McMaster, and I also did the IB program, but I was able to choose which classes I wanted to transfer over. So I only transferred over like English and Geo instead of like transferring Chem as well. So I actually transferred English just so that I could fly to UBC. I could have stayed another year if I wanted to get my honors, but I'm graduating with just like a Bachelor of Health Science, and yeah.
GPA, Allie? So in terms of your GPA, I do think that a lot of med schools in Canada place a lot of emphasis on having a high GPA. But one thing to remember is that there's also a lot of schools that have different weightings for your GPA that might make the average GPA that you see online higher than what it actually is. So for example, there's some schools that will drop your lowest grades from each year if you've done 3 full years before you apply. There's other schools that will take your best 2 years or your most recent 2 years. Although I do know that these
weighting systems?
Yeah, these systems are also always changing.
Yeah.
Like this year I think some schools are getting rid of it and things like that.
Yeah.
So make sure you check the admissions websites to keep up with that.
And one thing that we really want to stress is that even though GPA is important, like having good stats overall won't carry you. Like just because you have a 4.0 or like a really good Mcat doesn't like guarantee admission. I think there's like other parts of the application process, like the interview and the extracurriculars, that can also have a big impact on like how the admissions committee like views your file. A lot of universities post like admission stats so you can see the average admitted applicants GPA online, but you have to keep in mind that there is a range there and there are still people who get in with like lower GPAs. Have other parts of the application that like sets themselves apart.
Very true.
Yeah.
And even though we just said that GPA is important but not everything, I would definitely say that, you know, if you're just starting university or if you're in high school or something, I do think your first priority should really be your GPA when you're entering undergrad, just because you always have time to build your resume and add on more extracurriculars and even, you know, take a gap year or take more time before applying to build your extracurriculars. But it can be really difficult to recover from a really low GPA in your first few years, although it's certainly not impossible.
Yeah.
But I think definitely focus on GPA first and then work on all the other parts of the application.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Next, moving on to the Mcat. For those of you who don't know, the Mcat is like a 7-8 hours?
Wait, I don't know.
7 to 8 hour-ish exam. It basically takes up your entire day, and it's broken down to 4 different sections. There's Chem Phys, Cars, Biochem, and Psych Soc. Yeah.
Nice. So I took the Mcat the summer after my first year at McGill. And one of the reasons I took it so early was because since I had gotten IB credits for first year chem and bio, I took organic chemistry, biochemistry, and also physics in my first year at McGill. So I wanted to take it while those topics were still fresh in my mind. And another reason that I took it so early was because in my mind, if I had done poorly that year, I could retake it again the summer after before applying. But looking back, I don't think that's a good mentality to have going into it. You should just really try to study hard for it and not treat it like a trial run and just take it once and be done with it. And I'm glad I did well in that first time because the process of studying for the Mcat
it's so much longer than you expect.
It takes so much time. It's so draining, especially if you're doing other things like research and extracurriculars on top of it. It just takes so much energy and effort and money. It costs like $400 just to write the exam, not even counting like resources and stuff. So yeah, definitely try really hard and study really hard for your first take on the Mcat. Of course, if you want to retake it later, you can always do that, but yeah.
Wait, did you write in August?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I should say that, yeah.
Yeah.
So I spent basically exactly 4 months studying for it. I started studying at the beginning of May after my exams ended, and I took it at the end of August. And during that time, I was also doing things like, I took 2 summer courses online, and I was also doing research kind of part-time. So I think it's definitely possible to do other things while studying for the Mcat, but I also know some people who just dedicate their time to studying for the exam full-time.
Yeah. And I wrote the Mcat the summer of after my second year, so I was like, let me start studying a bit early. So I started studying with Brie when she was like preparing for her Mcat, and I was like, oh, let me just read the textbook, like write some notes, and then I can do like heavy studying later on, I guess. And this is because I actually wanted to like go abroad sometime, or like go on vacation in my second year summer, and I didn't want to like spend as much time studying then. But to be honest, that first summer was like a complete waste of time because like you just don't have enough space in your brain to hold all that information for so long. So would not recommend doing that. Definitely just like start studying once you feel like you can like
dedicate time towards it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually wrote it early June. This was because I originally wanted to finish it before I started my full-time like 9 to 5 summer internship, which started in May. So I made this decision in February, and I studied from February to April, and I was not ready, but thankfully because of COVID they like forced lockdown and we all rescheduled our test. So I rescheduled to June. I would definitely say like doing a full like course load along with my extracurriculars along with studying was a lot to manage and juggle at one time, and it definitely like wasn't the most productive. It can be done. I know not everyone is like in a privileged enough position where they can like just dedicate time to spend studying, but I did feel like very overworked during that period, especially when I actually started my 9 to 5 as well. I would work all day and then go home and then study, and quite a few people like talk about doing this, but I personally thought it wasn't very like productive because I would be so tired at the end of the day, and like when I started studying I felt like already exhausted.
Parkinson's law. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion, and I wholeheartedly believe in this. So if you only have a certain amount of time to study, you'll simply be more productive during that time. I also think if you spend the whole summer just studying for the Mcat, it's like your whole life is just Mcat and you get stuck, you know what I mean? It's like every day all you do is like grind, practice problems, read. It's like, I think for me personally, it's also good to, you know, be like, okay, this time at least I'm at the lab doing something else. I'm like working on calculus, whatever. Like, you know, but everyone's different.
Yeah.
So.
My advice is if you're in a position where you're very flexible with your time and you don't have to be worried about like financially supporting yourself or others, I think my recommendation would be like study part-time and maybe like find a job or like do a hobby or like take a class.
Or do research
or something like that for like part-time as well. Because I think full-time, like it's definitely possible, but it was not like
optimal.
Yeah, optimal. And if you're able to like choose what you want to do in the summer, I think that's what I'd recommend from my experience.
Well said, well said. I agree with that. Very good.
Recipe used.
My favorite topic. I'll talk about my very brief overview of how I studied. Okay, so what I did in terms of studying was in the first, so I had like 16 weeks, basically 4 months to study. In the first 4 to 6 weeks, I'd say, I read through all of the Kaplan textbooks. Well, I skipped like the psych-soc book and just read like some Reddit document. And then I also skipped like the physics book because I was like, okay, I don't need to read this. But for the bio and biochem stuff, I basically just read it and took notes. And looking back, I'm like, did I ever look back at those notes again? No. But also going back, I think I would still do the same thing, even if like I don't review the notes again, just because I feel like it's hard to jump into practice questions and stuff without having kind of a broad overview of all of the topics. Maybe Allie disagrees with this from the way she's looking at it. Before starting, I knew that people were like minimize time spent on content review and maximize time spent on practice questions and stuff. But I feel like for me personally, it was still really good to have a general overview of all the topics, and even if I didn't retain anything before starting. And then for the rest of my time, basically what I did was I bought the UWorld question banks and did all of those questions except for the cars. I bought the whole AAMC pack and did all of their full lengths, all of their section banks, question packs, flashcards, random things. I also did other random free full lengths, like the Kaplan ones, Next Step, Altius, whatever, random ones. And then for cars practice, I did the daily Jack Weston online ones, which are not that representative of the real thing, but I feel like they're still helpful. And I also did Anki. I used the Miles Down deck from Reddit. I deleted like a lot of the cards that I thought were useless, but I used that. And I also didn't make my way through the entire deck, but I just used that.
Me neither.
I don't even know how much I did. But one thing I did that I thought was really useful was I would make my own Anki flashcards from questions that I got wrong from UWorld or from the full lengths, and then I would do those alongside the Miles Down ones, and I feel like that was helpful. And yeah, that's what I did.
Okay, so I have some conflicting thoughts to Brie. I also wrote my notes when I first started off. I like hand wrote.
Oh, like a year before you took the actual test?
Relax. When I like started studying again. I like hand wrote notes, and that was like sort of useless in my opinion because I felt like you said you like wrote them and like got the information.
Okay, but I like typed them. I didn't write them. I spent so much time.
Yeah, I spent so much time writing them. Like I knew people said don't write notes, but I was like, I can write notes.
Oh my god.
No. To be honest, I would not recommend it just because there's like so much content, like more content than you would think. And like I think even when I was taking the Mcat, I didn't feel fully prepared. Like I feel like you can never
feel completely ready.
Well, I mean, maybe like people who get 528 feel that way.
No.
Yeah, I feel like you can never really feel fully prepared, and writing the notes took a long time, was a lot of effort, and I never looked at them again. And I felt like I got more out of it when I just like searched something up on Google or like on YouTube and like heard an explanation.
But so would you not recommend like reading through the textbooks?
No, I would recommend reading through the textbooks.
I feel like if you just read them and if I don't write anything, I'm not gonna remember anything from
just no. I would recommend reading the textbooks and doing the problems at the end of every chapter.
Oh, I see. I didn't do that, but yeah, sure, you can do that. I didn't do anything.
I would recommend doing that because I like switched my tactic halfway through because I was like, my test day is coming soon and this is not time efficient, so I sort of like switched that up halfway through my content review, and I think that definitely made things much quicker, and I don't think there was a large disparity in like how much information I retained. And since Brie wrote hers before me, I just like FaceTimed her and asked her for all her advice on what resources to use, so I used the exact same resources as her. But I personally also tried making my own Anki deck with questions that I got wrong, but I feel like it wasn't that helpful for me. Like I don't know, I like gave it a try, definitely like try out different techniques, and if it doesn't work for you, you don't need to keep using it.
That's true. I feel like sometimes I fall into that trap. Like I started doing this, so I had to keep doing it the entire study.
Oh, one thing that I did want to touch on was I'll link below the study schedule / like the Excel sheet that I use. Essentially, I broke down each day into like the different topics, as well as track like how many hours I studied for those topics, and I personally found this really helpful because I'm the type of person who like if I don't like a topic, I'm just like not gonna study it, or like study it rarely and only focus on the things that I do like. And by having this out, I can sort of see like a weekly plan or like schedule, or look back on what I already studied and try to balance out my studying a bit more and like really target those sections where like I know I don't want to do it.
No, I agree. That's like a good piece of advice I heard is like, don't avoid the topics that you're scared of. Or some people are like, oh, this is low yield, it won't come up. No, you have to, like, the stuff that you don't want to study and the stuff that you feel uncomfortable with, like, I feel like you really have to grind those sections.
I don't know how many weeks out it was, but I started doing one practice test a week on the weekends. So just like setting aside a day basically to do a practice test. And I think what's really important is to spend like the next day or the next few days after that reviewing your test. And it's not only just writing the test, but also looking back and seeing like what you got wrong, like what section you got it wrong in, and if there's any trends. And another thing for the spreadsheet is on the bottom you can see where I wrote about like the different full lengths that I did, and in here I like broke down each question and wrote about like what I got wrong and like
I did that
learning
too.
from I think I was inspired by Brie to do this.
Clown emoji, that's me. No, that was me too. I was like clown, why did I get this wrong? Yeah, very true.
Yeah,
I agree with Ali in that I think reviewing your full length is even more important than sitting down and actually taking it. I guess my tip for when you're reviewing is if I got a question wrong, I wouldn't just make sure I understood like why that specific one I got wrong or whatever, what the right answer should be. I would then go and kind of review that entire topic so that it was like, okay, I covered this one part, but okay, let me make sure I understand, you know, all the amino acids or whatever the question was. Yeah. And also in terms of taking your full length, I think it's really important that when you're taking the full length to really pretend as much as you can that it's the actual test, because I've seen, you know, online and stuff, a lot of people on their actual test will drop a lot from like the average of their full lengths. But I feel like if you, well, no, I shouldn't say that because maybe people just get nervous on test day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I feel like also sometimes people, when they're doing their full lengths, will, you know, they'll be like, oh, I'm tired, let me take a break, or like, oh, this is just on the tip of my brain, let me just like go search it up in my notes, or like not really emulate what
test
the situation would
like,
actually be on test day. So as much as you can, really try to put yourself in that environment and make the actual practice test as similar as you can to the actual test, because then, at least for me, on the actual day of my test, of course I was nervous, but it also just kind of felt like, okay, this is just practice test number like 14 or whatever. You know, I've like done this so many times before, I can do it one more time. So yeah. I think we should give some CARS specific advice because at least in Canada, I think definitely CARS is the most important section, and honestly for a lot of schools the rest of the Mcat doesn't matter that much. Like some schools have cutoffs, and past the cutoff they don't even care how you scored. For example, I know U of T, as of our application cycle, all you had to get was 125 in each section, and you could get 124 in one section, so that's an Mcat score of 499, and after you reach that cutoff they didn't look at what your score was. So honestly in Canada it's just CARS that's really important. Tips?
So I mentioned a couple minutes earlier how it's super important to like review the mistakes that you make on your full lengths, and for me I think that manifested a lot in my CARS section, just because the first time I took CARS I didn't really know what to expect. CARS is essentially just like a critical reading / analysis type of thing where you like answer different questions depending on the passage. As I was going through my full lengths I realized a lot of the mistakes I was making was because I was making assumptions about what was in the text and not because I was actually going through the text and looking at it critically. And I think once I recognized this trend in my incorrect answers, I was able to boost my score, because before I answered a question I was able to be like, is this really true, or is this just like what I'm assuming right away, like an unconscious biases or like perception. And I think that was one of the things that helped me.
Nice. Okay, so my advice for the CARS section would be to, throughout your like study period, I guess, first of all, be consistent with doing CARS practice questions. And what I did was I basically, you know, through online reading or word of mouth or whatever, I tried out a bunch of different strategies and really gave each of them like a fair shot.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, to see eventually like what would work for me. So some, I guess, just examples of strategy that I used was, there's a highlighting function you can use. So like sometimes, you know, I'd go through and highlight like keywords or like the main idea or the figures or whatever. I would also try like kind of reading through the passage pretty fast, and then once I got to the question, I would go back to the passage to find where the answer was. Or I would also try, you know, spending more time reading the passage really carefully, and then I could just go through the questions faster. Other things I tried were, you know, at the end of each paragraph, I would either mentally note or jot down like a little summary to make sure I was engaged. Just there's a lot of different strategies out there that you can try, but I would really just suggest you know, picking one or new strategy or whatever to try and really give them a fair shot, and don't just, you know, do 2 passages and be like, okay, wait, that sucked, I'm giving up. Like, you know, give it, I don't know, a few passages, like a week, a few days, and really see if that's something that works for you until you find kind of a good mix of the strategies that really helps you.
I totally forgot that I used, like, I didn't remember my first year until Brie mentioned it. So what strategy did you end up using?
I literally don't remember. I don't think I ended up highlighting. I don't remember. But I think it's just really what works for you. And I feel like a lot of people say like, oh, you can't improve on cars, it's just like how much you read as a kid or like how good you are. But you can definitely improve like by doing practice questions, finding a strategy that works for you, and like what Ali said, like really reflecting on where you're making your mistakes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Brie. I think another part of it is like identifying your own strengths and weaknesses. So I guess me personally, I think I'm like a pretty fast reader. So I actually use a double read method, which involves sort of reading it through quickly the first time and then reading it more in depth the second time. And I also liked highlighting, so I would highlight both the first time and the second time actually. And I know time is sometimes a limitation for certain people, but I found myself going through the sections like really fast. Like I had so much time left over.
Can't relate. I feel like I read pretty fast too, but I feel like cars I was always
I was just like zoom.
But maybe because I like, once I have a question, I'm like, which answer is right? You know, like I spend a lot of time being like, wait, is it this or this? Is it
no,
this or this?
I sort of just like
Anyways,
so one thing I did was sort of plan out like how much time I'm going to spend on each article before I even started reading, so that way I knew if I was going through it too quickly I would have to like read slower and really get into like the nitty-gritty details. So I did the double read method, and I think that really worked really well.
I feel like that strategy of kind of blocking, like knowing how much time in total and how many sections there are is also helpful for if you're not struggling with Ali's issue of going too fast. If you like struggle with not having enough time, which I feel like is most people's problems, because I think one thing I read online that's helpful to remember is all of the passages are worth the same amount of points. So if there's a really hard passage, don't spend like 30 minutes trying to get those, like just take the L and move on, you know what I mean? You don't want to kind of be stuck on one passage in the middle and not answer a passage at the end, which is easy. Sometimes I also found that maybe the passage would be really difficult to read, but then the questions would be easy. So don't like discount, you know, the questions just because the art, if you're like, oh my god, this passage was so hard to read, but sometimes the questions are straightforward. So, okay, that was useless advice, I'm just rambling, but like, whatever.
Anyways, the sun is really pretty right now.
Look at the gold you should show them, it's pretty.
They're just gonna be blinded.
Oh, I'm being blinded.
Sunset break. I'm like low-key sweating.
I know, me too.
We've been filming for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
So it's almost 9 p.m.
Some people say that you shouldn't do third-party cars passages because then you kind of get out of the mindset of doing the AMC logic cars, but I don't really agree with that, because I think first of all doing third-party cars is good for kind of training your ability to focus on, you know, long and convoluted passages or passages that are really boring to you, and just training your endurance for being able to sit there and focus for a really long time.
I would say definitely AMC was the most representative, but you take what you can get. Okay, next up, extracurriculars. Before we dive into extracurriculars, I think it's really important to remember there is no like cookie cutter or like perfect ideal candidate. So don't just like only do extracurriculars because like you think that will make you look better for med school applications, if that makes sense.
That's true. One thing that a lot of pre-med students do is try to look for extracurriculars that will make them unique and stand out from everyone else. But I think trying to be unique and trying to stand out is actually bad advice, because I'm like, okay, think about how many people are applying. Nothing you do is like truly unique, but I think you should just find the activities and the like areas of extracurriculars that you really like truly enjoy, and then try to dedicate a lot of like time and effort towards those activities and take initiative to find things in those areas that you can do. Even though I have no idea if these are actually true or not, I have some self-diagnosed strengths of our ECs. So for Ali's, I think Ali was really quirky, and like a lot of her extracurriculars were related to similar interests. So that really made her like stand out, because I don't know, from a like people could see that she did a lot of activities and invested a lot of time into her passions, and it was truly something she was actually interested in and not just doing for the resume. I think for me, a lot of my activities were really long-term and spanned a long time. Like there was a lot of like types of activities that I continued from high school and still spent a lot of time in university. Like for example, I was part of organizing Relay for Life, which is a cancer fundraiser, all throughout high school, and I continued that at McGill. So that was pretty long term. I also did gymnastics all my life and coached gymnastics, and when I went to university I coached Special Olympics rhythmic gymnastics, so that was pretty long term as well. And then as for research, again, it was pretty long term because I started in first year and stayed with the same lab all throughout university, and then I also did some kind of related clinical research, so that kind of added to the research part of my extracurriculars.
Yeah. For me personally, I think one thing that I was actually concerned about is that I didn't have as much continuity as Bree did. If you find something that you really enjoy, continuity is like super good, but I think you shouldn't just stay with something just for the continuity, because I know when I was like choosing my extracurriculars for like second and third year, I was like, oh, should I still be a part of this? Like, should I still be involved in this? And it wasn't because like I was debating whether or not I liked it. It was like, oh, should I just like stay in so I could say that I did it for like 2 or 3 years?
That's true.
And I think at the end of the day, it's really important to remember that when you let go of some when you let go of some things, other things will like make way into your life. And I got to try so many more new things because I like let go of the things that I knew I wasn't truly interested in. So a lot of my extracurriculars were centered around like media, so like marketing, photography, videography, like video editing. Yeah, like basically everything I did, even if it was for like a club or like some like other activity, it would always like center sort of back to photography.
It's a good story, you know? So I think looking at our sets of extracurricular activities, it's a good example of how there's really no one right way to get into med school in terms of extracurriculars. So you don't have to have all of your activities centered around one general theme, and you also don't have to have, you know, a lot of longevity or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, you could kind of tell that we put a lot of time and effort towards the things that we like really enjoyed, and it wasn't you know, just for resume. Because, you know, in my head I'm always like, yeah, I want to get into med school, but this is also like my life that I'm living, you know? You can't just do everything to get into, you know, for the resume. Like, this is time in my life that's passing by. So if you just spend all your time doing things for a purpose other than just purely enjoying it, it's kind of a waste of your life.
Yeah, and it like drains your energy too.
Exactly.
One thing that I learned throughout university is that like opportunities don't just like fall to your feet.
So true.
Maybe like once in a while they do, but most of the times you have to like go out looking for it and really like put yourself out there.
And it is like, okay, follow the advice of like do what you love, but it's also like you have to take the initiative to like find opportunities or create opportunities to, you know, get involved and find those things that you're really passionate about. In terms of, I feel like a big part of what differentiates people's ECs when it comes time to applying is like how people write about them, because, you know, a lot of people have done really cool things, and except for, I don't really know what the best way to write it is. Honestly. And like for UBC and for the ONSAS applications, they give you like 2 sentences to write about it. So I can't really help you there, sorry. Like, I don't know, just write it or something. Like, honestly, I don't know, like...
I don't know what they're looking for. Just like, do what seems right to you and don't wait till the last minute to write about everything. Now I'll touch really quickly on Casper. So some schools, do all schools require it? Only certain schools will require this in Canada. And essentially it's a situational judgment test where you're presented with different hypothetical situations and it asks you what you would do like in that situation and sort of why.
And when we took it, it was all written responses, but I think for this cycle they're changing it to half video response through talk and then half typing. We both scored in the 3rd quartile in Casper, which is not the best. So take any advice. No, so we won't be giving advice on Casper. But I will say that I was really worried that since I did not as great on Casper, that would mean that I would be bad at doing the MMI interviews too, because I think the types of questions you get in MMIs are kind of similar to the types of questions you get in Casper. But I don't think that was the case because we both did well in our MMI interviews, clearly. So yeah, if you do poorly in Casper, don't worry. I also received an interview to a school that looked at Casper pre-interview, so if you don't score the 4th quartile, don't worry, it's not the end of the world, except for maybe for McMaster, because they weigh Casper as 33% of their pre-interview score. You didn't know that?
For Canadian med school applications, you generally need 3 letters of reference. It's different depending on what school you apply to. Most often they ask for like academic and like non-academic or like potentially employment. Yeah, it differs depending on which school you apply to, I think.
Yeah, but in general you need definitely at least one professor that you took a class with and one that's not
like
other. Yeah, so make sure you have not just like only 3 professors or only 3 like employers.
Yeah. And my biggest piece of advice for letters of recommendation is to reach out early, because oftentimes these people that you're reaching out for letters from like have to write other letters for other people too. And I know like some of my friends, they like asked too late and the person said no because they were already writing like 20. So definitely if there's one person that like you really want on your list, reach out early and like clarify expectations ahead of time.
So when it comes to the letters of recommendation that you submit for Canadian medical school applications, I personally think it's really beneficial to form strong relationships with your referees, so they're not just a professor that you took a class with and they know nothing about you other than that you were a good student. And I think that was one of the strengths of my application, that I was really close with all of my reference letter writers. That being said, I feel like even if you think that your letters are not the strongest and it might just be professors that you didn't know that well or employers, we don't know really how important these letters are to the application process.
So last but not least, interview prep. I personally only did one MMI interview, but Bree did like all of them.
Yeah, so I had experience with MMI, like traditional panel interview, and Toronto's MP modified personal interview, which is, I guess, yeah, it was like a mix between MMI and traditional panel interviews. So for a normal panel interview, there's normally about, I guess, 2 to 4 people on the other side of the room or over Zoom, because all of our interviews were virtual. And they'll typically just ask you a string of different questions. I know for some schools it can range from, you know, typical job interview questions to more MMI style questions, but you have the same interviewers the whole time. And then I guess the difference for MMI and the MPI is that there's multiple stations, and at each station there's a different interviewer on the other side watching your interview. So it's kind of like at each interview there's a fresh start, because there's different people watching you. And also the MMI style of questions are a bit different than the traditional panel interview questions. There's really a wide range of the types of questions. You know, some are more situational, some are more asking about just current topics or just anything, kind of random, unexpected questions. And next we'll talk a bit about how we prepare for our interviews.
So I've heard like a diversity of experiences for interview prep. I know some people like to prepare like super early on, and some people prepare only later, leading up to the interview day. And I personally only prep for like, well, I only did interview question prep like a week and a half out before my interview. We actually had our interviews on the same day, so we prepared together for like a few hours each day. And I thought that was really helpful, like being able to hear feedback from someone else as well as like listen to see how their perspective is different than your own is something that I think is really valuable. And I was like scared to practice with other people because, you know, it's like scary.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like being judged on your answers. Yeah, I agree.
But like I'm so glad that we did practice, because I feel like I was sort of able to figure out like a way where I could like approach certain types of questions more systematically, which I think helped like calm my nerves before the actual interview. And even though I only did like face-to-face interview prep around a week before my interview, once I like heard that I had an interview offer, I started like listening to the news more. Just like something super simple, like 10 to 20 minutes each day. For example, I listened to this podcast, it's like CTV, like daily news, and every weekday it will like update you on news around the world. And that was actually really helpful for my interview, because I was able to apply lots of that knowledge into like my answers.
Nice. So kind of similar to Ali, I didn't start preparing until I think for each of my interviews, I started like exactly a week before. But during that week, I went pretty, like all I did was basically, well, I kept up with school and whatever, but I spent a lot of time prepping for the interview. And so in addition to the practice that I did with Ali, which is a few hours each day, I also just like set up my, what is that, like little photo booth camera and would, you know, pull up a question randomly, time myself, give myself, you know, 2 minutes to jot down my thoughts and then talk for 5 minutes or whatever, like similar to the structure of the MMI, and just practice to myself. And then after I said my answer, I would kind of reflect on, okay, what else could I have added and things like that. So I spent a good amount of time doing that too. I definitely think it's helpful to practice with other people, just to hear, like Ali said, different perspective. And I think, you know, for some people, they might like practicing with complete strangers better. So there's lots of people like on Reddit or whatever making interview groups. So if you prefer to do that rather than practice with like your friends and stuff, that can also be an option. What else did I do? Oh, and the types of, like the sources where we got our interview questions were just literally online. If you search up, oh, you can probably link something like list of MMI questions from Reddit or random forums. There's a lot of questions. There's plenty to practice from. I think in terms of practicing, especially for MMI, it's really helpful to practice with the exact timing that you know your interview is going to be in the format of. So like most of the time the schools will tell you in the email the exact format of how their interview is going to be. For example, I don't remember what school it was like, but yeah, it was like, say you get the question, you have 2 minutes to read, 5 minutes to talk, and then 2 minutes for a follow-up question, for example. So practicing in that kind of exact format, you know, making up follow-up questions for each other like we did, is really helpful because, you know, you might think that it's easy to just talk for 5 minutes straight, but it can be really hard to fill up the time with a good structure, and yeah, so definitely practice is helpful. I think there's also such thing as kind of over prepping and just like stressing yourself out, especially in the like few days leading up to it. And you get to I remember like on the last day I was like, oh Ali, do you want to run through some more questions? And Ali was like, no, I'm done. I'm good. So I think that's really good to, you know when you feel ready and when doing more practice is not going to be beneficial and it's just going to stress you out. So
yeah, I think like another thing to remember is that the types of questions, like sure you can like prepare with the questions you see on the internet, but what you get the day of could be totally different. Like,
it will.
It could be. I was like, it could be like similar, but it could be totally different. And I think if you only practice one style of question, then like you might feel tripped up on the actual day when you get hit with something that you haven't seen before.
That's true. I don't really have that many tips because, like I don't know if you're gonna keep this in, but you know, it's like we don't know if what we did was actually good, or you know, we don't really know what they're looking for or anything like that. But I think one thing I really tried to do in my interview, and I think this is beneficial for everyone, is try to talk like you're a real person and not sound really scripted and fake, if that makes sense.
This is just speaking on our own experiences, of course. I know some people who like started preparing like way earlier in advance. I think I was just like too intimidated to start like practicing, and I started waiting until the last minute. But it's like different for everyone depending on like how comfortable you are with interviewing or like these types of questions or getting put on the spot, I guess. I think that's it for the video. We've been talking for a super long time, so I honestly don't know if we covered everything or if we missed anything. If you have any more questions, feel free to comment them down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to give it a like, subscribe down below. Let us know if we should make a podcast. I'm keeping that in. Well, I feel like podcasts would be so fun.
Yeah.
Okay,
podcast coming soon.
make sure to subscribe. See y'all next week. Bye.
Next week. Well. Wait, should I say my name?
Yeah.
Okay. I know people are gonna ask. Like, Google search bar right there. Type. Am I wrong?
She's savage. Yeah, let me just restart this whole section.
Some schools drop your lowest.
Just say all of this. Just say all of this.
Okay, then you say this. You say it's important, but it's not everything. Okay, I'll give you your script. You'll give me your script. You'll be like, that's what I'm saying. You're like, just like, this is really chaotic and stressful. Yes, please.
I'm gonna have a blue face for that.
Oh my god, talk about how we study. Wait, break time. I'm gonna go eat a hot Cheeto. Oh, my butt in the video.
Mcat. Okay, so you can kick us off. Nobody, Brie carrying this whole video. How's your back feeling, Brie?
Oh, I'm in pain. I'm in pain. Wow, this video's gonna be so long. Relax.
Okay, anything else that we have to mention about?
It'll be a great juxtaposition to your 3-minute video. You saw.
She needs to relax with it.
Next, Casper. We can start with what the Casper is.
Yeah. What is Casper?
I don't remember.
Casper.
It's gonna be a Casper mattress.
Can we talk about Casper? Can we just say next?
No, we should talk about it.
Oh! Okay,
Wait, no, you got it.
I already forgot.